the extremely cruel and degrading sexual exploitation of black male slaves by white mistresses during the slavery era remains a largely hidden chapter in history. Many enslaved people lived in rudimentary huts situated far from the opulent mansions of their enslavers. However, a white mistress might summon a strong black male slave to a hidden room or chamber within the plantation house, typically at night. A black female slave, often working as the mistress's maid, would act as the intermediary, delivering the summons. Refusal was unthinkable. The consequences could range from brutal whippings and confinement to being sold to a distant plantation, forever separated from family. This power imbalance extended beyond physical labor. Enslaved men were stripped of bodily autonomy. The concept of consent didn't apply. Their bodies were considered the property of their enslavers. For the black male slaves, the walk to the mistress's chambers represented a journey into despair, a violation not only of their dignity, but of their very being. Societal perceptions of the white mistress often contrasted sharply with her actions behind closed doors. She might project an image of virtuous Southern womanhood, yet secretly wield unchecked authority, indulging in desires she couldn't openly acknowledge. Survival for the enslaved men depended on compliance. Even a hint of resistance could provoke deadly accusations of insubordination. False accusations could lead to lynching, torture, or summary execution. This constant threat ensured their silence and submission. Testimonies from formerly enslaved individuals, collected during the 1930s by the Federal Writers Project, paint a chilling picture. One man recounted being summoned to his mistress's room at night, knowing that refusal would result in brutal punishment. His simple statement, heavy with unspoken emotion, encapsulates the impossible choice faced by countless enslaved men. Historical accounts expose a wider societal complicity in these abuses. While the sexual exploitation of enslaved women by white men was frequently acknowledged, the mistress's transgressions against enslaved men often went unmentioned. Even accounts like Harriet Jacobs's incidents in the life of a slave girl, while focusing on the exploitation of women, hint at the pervasive abuse experienced by men, suggesting an unspoken understanding of the widespread nature of the power dynamic. Modern historians, such as Dana Ryback and Adrian Davis, have further explored these hidden abuses, highlighting the intersections of race, gender, and power within the context of slavery. They argue that white mistresses utilized their control over enslaved men to assert a distorted form of agency within a patriarchal system that otherwise constrained their own autonomy. The horrors of plantation life extended far beyond physical violence and grueling labor. The power dynamics allowed mistresses to exploit their authority in deeply dehumanizing ways, often followed by public humiliation, to reinforce their control and isolate the victim from his community. The architecture of the plantations itself played a sinister role. Hidden spaces, attics, bedrooms, storage rooms, provided the secrecy necessary for these abuses. Enslaved men were often summoned under false pretenses, like repairs, to these secluded areas, where coercion and violence were unchecked. The exploitation was fueled by a toxic racial fetishization. Black men were often viewed through a lens of hypersexuality, simultaneously objectified for their perceived physicality, and dehumanized as dangerous and uncontrollable. This duality allowed mistresses to exploit them in private, while maintaining a public facade of victimhood or moral superiority. The selection of enslaved men was often based on physical attributes, further reducing them to mere instruments of gratification. Promises of favoritism were often used as traps, with the withdrawal of these privileges resulting in harsher treatment. Some mistresses even pretended affection, creating a false sense of mutuality that masked the inherent violence of the relationship. The isolation of the targeted men was another method of control, both ensuring secrecy and reinforcing the mistresses' power by cutting them off from their support systems. Occasional glimpses into these abuses surfaced in legal and personal records. Divorce proceedings, court records, and personal diaries of plantation mistresses offer rare, unsettling insights. While these accounts rarely provided explicit details, the language used suggested exploitative dynamics that were both normalized and concealed. In some cases, the sale of an enslaved man to a distant plantation served to erase evidence of the affair and reinforce the husband's authority. Historians analyzing these diaries note the veiled language used to describe these relationships, often framing them as challenges to authority rather than abuses of power. The question of whether this aspect of Black history is intentionally hidden to avoid white embarrassment is a significant one. The discussion of whether the knowledge of white mistresses' sexual relationships with Black slaves could have served as a form of punishment for white masters also requires further exploration. This is a vital area of study. We need to understand the full scope of the abuses endured by enslaved people during this horrific period of history. Continuing the discussion on the sexual exploitation of enslaved Black men by white mistresses during the antebellum South requires a nuanced approach, acknowledging the complexity of the power dynamics at play and the lasting impact of such trauma. Further research into primary sources like plantation diaries, court records, and oral histories can illuminate the extent and nature of these abuses. While some accounts offer explicit details, many rely on coded language or indirect references, requiring careful interpretation and contextualization within the broader socio-political landscape of slavery. The inherent power imbalance inherent in the master-slave relationship allowed white mistresses to exploit their authority in ways that were rarely challenged or brought to justice. The silence surrounding these abuses is a key element requiring investigation. The societal norms of the time, reinforced by deeply ingrained racist ideologies, contributed significantly to the normalization and concealment of these acts. The racialized sexual stereotypes of the era, depicting Black men as hypersexual and aggressive, provided a convenient justification for the mistress's actions, while simultaneously preserving the illusion of white female innocence and virtue. This complex interplay of race, gender, and power further obscured the reality of the sexual violence experienced by enslaved men. The lack of legal recourse and the constant threat of violence prevented victims from reporting the abuse, further reinforcing the perpetrator's impunity. Analyzing the motivations behind the mistress's actions necessitates careful consideration. While some scholars argue that the mistress's behavior represented a twisted assertion of autonomy within a patriarchal system, others point to the inherent sadism and power dynamics of slavery itself as the driving force. It's plausible that various factors, including personal desires, racial prejudice, and the power to exert control over another human being, contributed to their behavior. Further research could explore the psychological impact of such acts on both the victims and perpetrators, shedding light on the long-term consequences of this hidden form of abuse. The legacy of these abuses continues to resonate today. Understanding the full extent of sexual violence within the context of slavery is crucial for acknowledging the deep-seated trauma experienced by generations of Black Americans and addressing the ongoing systemic inequalities rooted in the history of racial oppression. The ongoing work of historians to uncover these hidden histories and give voice to the silenced narratives of enslaved men is essential for a more complete and accurate understanding of the past and for fostering healing and reconciliation in the present. Further research focusing on the lives of individual victims, the strategies they employed to survive, and the long-term consequences of this trauma is necessary to fully appreciate the complexities of their experiences and the lasting impact of slavery. This will require a continued commitment to uncovering the truth, however uncomfortable it may be, and to centering the voices and experiences of those who suffered the most. Further research into the sexual exploitation of enslaved Black men by white mistresses necessitates a multifaceted approach, engaging with diverse methodologies and perspectives to illuminate the complexities of this often overlooked aspect of slavery. This requires moving beyond the limitations of readily available historical records, which often lack explicit detail or rely on coded language, and incorporating methodologies that engage with the lived experiences of those affected. Oral histories, where available, offer invaluable insights, even if fragmented or filtered through the passage of time. These narratives, even if incomplete, can provide crucial emotional context and shed light on the psychological impact of the abuse. Analyzing the physical spaces where these acts occurred, the hidden rooms, attics, and storage areas of plantations can also yield significant insights. Architectural analysis, combined with textual evidence, can reveal how the design and layout of these spaces facilitated the secrecy and power dynamics at play. Furthermore, the analysis of material culture, including personal items belonging to enslaved individuals or the remnants of plantation structures, may offer subtle yet meaningful clues about the realities of these encounters. Such approaches, while less straightforward than examining explicit accounts, can nevertheless provide valuable contextual information. Comparative analysis with similar historical cases, both within the United States and globally, can enrich our understanding of these power dynamics. Examining patterns of sexual exploitation in other contexts of enslavement or subjugation, such as colonial societies or other historical systems of oppression, can highlight commonalities and differences, potentially illuminating broader trends and underlying mechanisms. This comparative approach can help contextualize the specificities of the antebellum South while avoiding generalizations that may obscure the unique characteristics of the situation. The ethical considerations surrounding this research are paramount. Researchers must approach this sensitive topic with utmost respect for the victims and their descendants, ensuring that their stories are told accurately and responsibly. This requires a careful balance between academic rigor and ethical sensitivity, prioritizing the avoidance of re-traumatization and the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes. Collaborating with community organizations and descendant communities is crucial in this process, ensuring that research is conducted in a culturally sensitive and respectful manner. Finally, it's essential to consider the long-term consequences of these abuses. The intergenerational trauma resulting from sexual violence inflicted on enslaved men requires further exploration. This includes examining its impact on family structures, community dynamics, and the psychological well-being of subsequent generations. Addressing this legacy demands a commitment to truth-telling, acknowledging the deep and lasting wounds inflicted by this historical injustice, and working towards the healing and reconciliation needed to address the systemic inequalities it helped to create. Only through a comprehensive and ethical approach can we begin to fully understand the devastating impact of these often hidden aspects of slavery and work toward a more just future.